Director of Integrity Institute, Dr. Bryce Edwards. Bryce, kia ora, good morning.
Morena, Andrew.
This is, well, there's a little bit of human nature in this as well, but undue political influence, a couple of stories that we're focusing in on today, including one where it says, well, hey, if a business person makes a political donation, a donation to a political party, then perhaps they can expect some favours. It looks like a pretty clear case of this recently.
Yes, so there's increasingly, I think, scrutiny of what money's been given to politicians in politics around the world, regardless of whether it's Donald Trump in the US or, yeah, New Zealand First in New Zealand.
Yep.
But one that's kind of coming up on the radar is a story on RNZ today about a donation that was given last year to New Zealand first.
Yep.
$20,000 was given by a company called Dines Transport, and this kind of seemed to come out of the blue. It's quite a big company, actually, in the South Island.
Yep.
It's based in, I think, Southland and South Otago, and they gave $20,000 to the party. They then applied for fast track approval for doing creating this inland port
Mm.
in Mosgiel. So an inland port is essentially nothing to do with the sea or ships. It's more about trains and trucks and setting up a kind of hub for them all to meet and where you have, everything stored. So they applied for fast track, but they didn't get it,
Yep.
which is quite interesting. And it probably speaks well about the government's Fast Track Act that a donor applied and had it rejected. But then what happened next was that Shane Jones, as the Minister for Regional Development, then decided to give them a loan from the Regional Development Fund of $8 million
Hmm.
to help with this inland port, and that looked a bit dodgy. And because there was no great sort of transparent process for how this was done, it kind of came out of the blue. And there was another company also building an inland port, I think in Milton, I think.
Milton, okay.
So yeah, and so there were competing inland ports. The government decided to put their they pick one of the winners without really clear kind of criteria or information. So it looked a bit strange. And then last week, so this all happened in the last year.
Yep.
And then last week, Winston Peters, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Rail,
Yep.
made an appointment to the KiwiRail board, because KiwiRail is a state-owned enterprise,
Hmm.
and he awarded the appointment to, I think, the chair of Dines Transport.
Yep.
And I think that this his name was, I just better check, Scott O'Donnell.
Yep.
And Scott O'Donnell then, I think, stepped down as the chair of the transport company, but remained as one of the directors.
Hmm.
And so again, that just looks a bit fishy to have someone appointed like that, who's just given a big donation to the party.
Yep.
And so that's what this story is about today. Lots of questions about, whether this donation might have kind of greased the wheels to make some of these government decisions more likely.
Yeah, I mean, it is a good return on investment. $20,000 donation, $8 million loan. I mean, that's just good business in some ways. There is a case, though, to say, hey, proximity doesn't mean causality here. Because this organisation made a donation doesn't mean that's why this person got a place on the board. However, without the transparency, without the, hey, how did this come about, without Shane Jones or Winston Peters saying, hey, this is what's happening here, there's bound to be speculation, or at least there should be speculation, if we don't have a clear, transparent path, right?
I think that's all absolutely true. We don't know for sure that these things were related. For all we know, well, I think it's very unlikely that Peters and Jones didn't know about this donation, which
Yeah.
was the second biggest that they received last year. and they might well have been giving these government decisions regardless of the donation. But yeah, I think they have to kind of defend it now and convince us otherwise. But
Yeah.
that's up to them, and
I,
it's up to the public to
is it,
decide
I
on
mean,
this.
it's also the case that you're going to give appointments to people that you know and trust. That the
Yeah,
people that you're in relationship with who have proven integrity because you've seen what they've done over a period of time. And
exactly,
again,
and that might well be the case. And this company does have a proven track record of building up a large company in the transport and logistics business. So, and they deal a lot with Kiwi Rail. They have a lot of relationships with the government in terms of contracts, but especially with Kiwi Rail.
yeah,
So they know their transport stuff,
yeah,
and so maybe that's an appropriate appointment and an appropriate funding issue, but there's not a lot of managing of, as far as we can see, not a lot of managing of that conflict of interest,
yeah,
uh, because there's going to be a lot of decisions that Kiwi Rail has to make that might not be in the interests of this big trucking company.
yeah.
And how will we know that there's not compromises being made there that aren't in the public interest?
Yeah, certainly worth investigating. Although, honestly, I think an inland port's not a bad use for Mosgiel. And
Yeah.
not a bad place to have an inland port in that regard. Hey, on to another issue, and this is this issue certainly there's been a political influence of the alcohol lobby for many years, but also one most recently. What's the details here, Bryce?
So we're not talking about donations here. We're talking more about lobbying.
Yep.
And so the alcohol industry is, quite rightly, from their own point of view, interested in government policy that affects their businesses, about, what can be sold, what are the regulations around, the sale of alcohol. And there's a lot in New Zealand, of
Yep.
course. In this case, it's around the Ministry of Health. So the Ministry of Health are the people that develop policy around alcohol. And they have, within the Ministry of Health, there's the Public Health Agency, and they have a unit that does the alcohol policy and analysis and so forth. And they are kind of given directives that they need to talk to the industry
Yep.
in making up these policies. So they have to actually deal with alcohol companies and their lobbyists and so forth. But there's some sense in them doing that, perhaps. But some stories have come out that they work very closely with the alcohol industry, and there's been some investigations and OIAs,
Yep.
requests under the Official Information Act that show just how close that working relationship is. And a lot of experts have said it's too close.
Yep.
They are just too friendly, and they're helping the alcohol industry too much. And so there's a lot of debate within health about whether that they've overstepped the mark. Some people think they have. Some people think, no, well, that's just what government policy analysts have to do.
Yep.
And then the latest element of that story is today that the person that runs this unit also runs at the ministry Friday drinks, end of week drinks. Getting together the alcohol and
Yeah.
and chatting, and of course that's pretty common in lots of
Yep.
workplaces. And there's nothing per se that's wrong with that.
Yeah.
But is it appropriate for the person that's regulating alcohol and trying to reduce alcohol harm,
Yeah.
because of course there is a lot of it,
Yes.
and come out ways to reduce it, to be also organising drinks sessions with all the staff?
I mean, it's not a great look. However, I'm not sure that having a teetotaler in charge of this particular branch of government would be an even better look. As we were saying beforehand, each person has their perspective, and they bring that. We don't know if the alcohol lobby provides the alcohol for Friday night drinks, for example. That would be perhaps an extra barrier.
That would presumably doesn't happen, and that would be pretty shocking.
Yeah.
But there are lots of cases where the alcohol industry does provide freebies to decision makers.
Yep.
And so, for example, you've got lots of examples. For example, you have in Parliament the parliamentary rugby team,
Yep.
which is made up of MPs and journalists and all sorts of staffers, and they go on tour and they're sponsored by Lion Nathan.
Yep.
And it's obviously not a big deal, but it's all part of what alcohol companies admit to doing, which is building relationships with the people that make the decisions.
Yep.
It just gives them a bit more of an in. Every Christmas they send a box of beer and stuff to
Yep.
MPs and their staffers, and it's not, this isn't big money. It's essentially free produce from the companies.
Exactly. Yep.
And then the other one that I think is interesting is that every Waitangi, every February, Shane Jones has his Waitangi party at his home. And we've learnt recently that all the alcohol there is provided for free by alcohol companies. So again, maybe that's a good thing, but it certainly creates some conflicts of interest potentially. It just shows, how much the alcohol industry do kind of grease the wheels with their produce.
Exactly, lubricate the process. Now, I suppose this comes down to it being able to tell the difference between what is just relationship and appropriate lobbying and what is perhaps undue influence and what becomes an integrity issue. Thanks for what you do with the Integrity Institute in investigating all of this. We'll encourage people to find out more and hold their politicians to account for any perhaps inappropriate relationships in that space. But Bryce, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.